The silent watcher. Have you ever felt someone watching you when you were completely alone? That sensation of eyes peering through windows, or the subtle feeling that something just isn't right. I never truly understood that fear until that stormy weekend in Montana. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend. My best friend Amber had asked me to watch her place in Whitefish while she took her family to Seattle for a long weekend. Her Victorian home was nestled among towering pines at the edge of Glacier National Park, isolated, peaceful, and ordinarily exactly the kind of getaway I'd enjoy. The only other resident was her skittish tabby cat, Phantom, who was terrified of thunderstorms. And wouldn't you know it, a massive weather system was forecasted to hit that entire weekend. The storm began rolling in Thursday night before Amber left, with distant thunder echoing through the mountains. By Saturday morning, I was completely settled in. Rain lashed against the windows, but inside I was cozy, curled up with a book on a rustic leather sofa, occasionally glancing out at the misty forest surrounding the property. Despite the weather, Phantom seemed unusually calm. Around 2 p.m., the landline phone rang, jarring me from my reading. Who even uses landlines anymore? The caller ID simply read unknown number. I let it ring out, assuming it was a telemarketer. But minutes later, it rang again, same unknown number. This time, the answering machine picked up, and after the beep, I heard a voice that made my skin crawl. It was a man's voice, quiet and unsettlingly calm. He said just one word, Amber, like he was asking if she could hear him. Then silence for several seconds before the line went dead. I texted Amber to let her know someone had called, though I found it strange they'd used the landline instead of her cell. She never responded, probably busy with family activities. Over the next 3 hours, that same unknown number called twice more. No messages this time. I tried to shake off my unease. I made some pasta, watched some Netflix, and eventually headed upstairs around 8:30 to watch a movie in the master bedroom. Halfway through, I remembered I needed to check on Phantom's food and water bowls. When I went downstairs, what I saw sent a chill down my spine. Phantom was standing motionless at the front door, staring intently at the narrow gap beneath it, not pawing or meowing, just staring as if waiting for something. Phantom, I called softly. The cat briefly glanced at me before returning its gaze to the door. Something about that behavior deeply unsettled me. I approached the door and hesitantly peered through the peephole. The glass was fogged from the rain, making everything outside distorted and blurry. But then something moved. There was definitely a figure standing on the porch. My heart pounded as I stared through the peephole, trying to make out who or what was there. For nearly 3 minutes, I watched, frozen in place. The figure didn't move, didn't knock, didn't do anything that a normal visitor would do. Eventually, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. After all, if someone was there, wouldn't they have knocked by now? I reluctantly left to check Phantom's food and grab some snacks. When I passed the front door again, Phantom was gone. I looked through the peephole once more, and something had changed. The shape I'd seen earlier had disappeared. Thoroughly unnerved, I scooped up Phantom and brought him to the bedroom with me. I tried to focus on the movie, but couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. About 30 minutes later, Phantom suddenly jumped off the bed and padded to the bedroom door. Just like before, he stared fixedly at the gap between the door and the floor, completely motionless. My voice shook as I called his name, but he remained laser-focused on the door. Quietly, I got up and pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then I crouched down to look under the door. What I saw made me violently recoil. A pair of boots stood just inches from the door. Someone was standing right outside the bedroom. My eyes darted to the doorknob. I hadn't locked it. With trembling hands, I snapped the lock into place. Almost immediately, I heard rapid footsteps retreating down the hallway and down the stairs. With my heart threatening to burst from my chest, I called 911, then called Amber. By the time the Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies arrived, the house was empty, though they found wet footprints throughout the house and signs that someone had jimmied open a basement window. The investigation revealed that the unknown caller was likely a stalker who had been watching Amber for months. They traced the calls to a burner phone purchased in Missoula, but the trail went cold there. The deputies believed the intruder had been watching the house, knew Amber was away, and had probably been planning to wait for her return. We never found out who he was or what his ultimate intentions were. To this day, Amber has upgraded her security system, moved to a gated community in Bozeman, and rarely stays alone. And me? I can't look at a door the same way again. I always find myself watching the gap beneath it, wondering if someone is watching back. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have checked under the door? Or would your instincts have told you to barricade yourself in immediately? Let me know in the comments below. If this story sent chills down your spine, please hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Tales Vault. Your support helps us reach our first 100 subscribers, and trust me, I have many more true nightmare experiences to share. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes that feeling of being watched isn't just your imagination. False interview. Desperation makes us vulnerable. When you're down on your luck, you'll grasp at any opportunity that presents itself, even one that arrives at an unusual hour from an unknown source. That's the trap I fell in last October, and it nearly cost me everything. After being laid off from my marketing position at a tech startup in Austin, Texas, I spent weeks scrolling through job boards, sending applications into what felt like a digital void. Each morning, I wake up, make coffee, and stare at my laptop screen for hours, hoping for a response. Any response. By the third week, my savings were dwindling and panic was setting in. That's when I decided to try some lesser-known job sites. One afternoon, while browsing through a site I'd never used before, I received an email notification that made my heart jump. The subject line read, "Marketing Manager Position, Interview Request." The sender introduced himself as Marcus, claiming to be the hiring manager for a boutique marketing firm in the Hill Country. The email seemed promising. The position description matched my skills perfectly, and the salary was even better than my previous job. There was just one peculiar detail. Marcus insisted the interview needed to happen that same night at 7:30 p.m. A voice in the back of my mind questioned this unusual timing, but my desperation silenced it immediately. I told myself showing up on short notice would demonstrate my flexibility and eagerness. I responded with an enthusiastic yes and received the address within minutes. At 7:15 p.m., I pulled into the parking lot of a small, unmarked office building in an industrial park on the outskirts of New Braunfels. The lot was completely empty. All the windows were dark. The only illumination came from a distant street lamp that cast long shadows across the asphalt. I checked the address again on my phone. This was definitely the right place. I tried calling the number Marcus had provided in his email, but it went straight to voicemail. I called 3 more times over the next 20 minutes with the same result. By 7:45 p.m., I accepted that something wasn't right. The vacant parking lot, the darkened building, the unresponsive contact, none of it added up to a legitimate job opportunity. I drove home, frustrated but relieved to have trusted my instincts. I decided to stick with mainstream job sites from then on. Back at my apartment in the Riverside district, I cracked open a beer, turned on the latest episode of a crime drama, and tried to put the weird evening behind me. As the night progressed, I occasionally heard creaking sounds from the floor above, but my upstairs neighbor often worked night shifts at the hospital, so I thought nothing of it. Around 11 p.m., exhaustion hit me. I switched off the TV, turned out the lights, and headed upstairs to my bedroom. I remember falling asleep almost instantly, the stress of job hunting and the strange evening having drained me completely. I don't know exactly how long I slept before my eyes snapped open. My bedroom was pitch black, but I was suddenly, inexplicably awake. As I lay there disoriented, I heard that same creaking sound. Only this time, it wasn't coming from above. It was coming from inside my room. My eyes strained against the darkness, gradually adjusting until I could make out the silhouettes of my furniture. Then I heard a slow, scraping sound, the unmistakable noise of my closet door sliding open. I watched, paralyzed with terror, as the door inched open and a dark figure leaned out from behind it. My body felt like it was made of lead, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. Was this a nightmare? Some sleep paralysis episode? It wasn't until the figure shifted slightly that reality crashed over me. This was really happening. Someone was in my bedroom, watching me sleep. Adrenaline surged through my body, breaking whatever spell had held me in place. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and leapt from my bed, backing away from the closet. The intruder remained eerily still, as if hoping I somehow hadn't noticed them despite my obvious panic. With my eyes now adjusted to the darkness, there was no question. A person was standing there, watching me. I bolted from the room and out of my apartment, dialing 911 as I ran. Perhaps foolishly, I stopped in the parking lot, keeping my eyes fixed on my front door. I wasn't going to let whoever this was escape before the police arrived. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars from the Austin Police Department pulled up with their lights flashing. I explained what had happened and told them I never saw anyone come downstairs. The intruder was likely still in my closet. The officers entered with weapons drawn and, sure enough, found a man hiding exactly where I'd seen him. As they dragged him out in handcuffs, I got my first good look at him under the hallway lights. The sight made my skin crawl. He had greasy, unkempt hair that hung past his shoulders. His clothes were filthy, like he'd been wearing them for weeks. But it was his eyes that haunted me. Wide, unblinking, and completely devoid of emotion as they fixed on me while the officers led him away. The investigation that followed revealed the horrifying truth. The man, whose name was Trevor Rankin, had created hundreds of fake job listings across dozens of websites. He'd used the information from submitted resumes to identify potential victims, arrange fake interviews, and break into their homes while they were away. The police found a laptop in his car containing detailed notes on dozens of people, including their daily routines, when they left for work, when they typically returned home, and even what rooms they spent the most time in. My name was on that list, along with notes about my interview time. What he planned to do once inside these homes, he never confessed, without him saying it outright. There was no way to know what would have happened had I not woken up. I've since moved to a secure building in downtown Austin with 24-hour security. I never apply for jobs through unknown websites. And most importantly, I've installed a lock on my bedroom door and closet. A reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear aren't just in our dreams, but hiding in the dark corners of our own homes. What terrifies me most isn't just what happened, but what almost happened. How many nights had he been watching me before I noticed? And what would have occurred if I hadn't woken up when I did? Isolated, the midnight visitor. There's something uniquely vulnerable about living in isolation. The vast emptiness that surrounds you can feel peaceful during daylight hours. But when darkness falls, that same emptiness transforms into an abyss where anything could be hiding, watching, waiting. I learned this lesson the hard way on my property in western Nebraska, where the endless prairie stretches toward the horizon in every direction. After retiring from my job as a civil engineer at age 44, I purchased an old farmhouse on 30 acres of land about 40 minutes outside of Valentine. My nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away, and the only connection to civilization was a narrow county road that connected to Highway 20. Some people can't understand why anyone would choose such solitude. For me, it was paradise. No traffic, no noise pollution, just the gentle whisper of wind through the tall grass and the brilliant tapestry of stars overhead each night. At least, that's what I thought until that rainy week last April. The storms have been relentless for days, turning the dirt roads into muddy channels and drumming against my metal roof with hypnotic persistence. Around noon on the 5th day of rain, I stepped onto my covered porch for a cigarette, watching the water form rivulets across my property while enjoying the earthy scent of wet soil. I'd been sitting there for about an hour when I noticed movement on the horizon. Through the curtain of rain, I could make out a figure traveling down the remote access road that led to my property. As it drew closer, I realized it was someone on a dirt bike, riding through the downpour with apparent determination. The rider continued directly toward my house, which was unusual. Nobody comes down this road by accident. It leads nowhere except my property. Eventually, they pulled up near my detached garage and stopped. The rider, wearing a full-face helmet that obscured their features, sat there for several long moments, surveying my home. When they finally noticed me sitting on the porch, they stared in my direction for an uncomfortable length of time before abruptly turning around and riding back the way they had come. The encounter left me with an uneasy feeling, but I rationalized it away. Perhaps they were lost, or maybe a new ranger from the national forest land that bordered my property to the north. I went back inside as the rain intensified, made a fresh pot of coffee, and called my brother in Omaha for our weekly chat. By evening, I had almost forgotten about the strange visitor. The storm took a dramatic turn around 8 p.m. Lightning split the darkened sky in jagged patterns. Thunder shook the foundations of my old farmhouse, and the rain hammered down with renewed fury. Yet somehow, through this cacophony of natural sounds, I heard something that didn't belong, the distinctive growl of a dirt bike engine cutting through the night. I moved to my front window and peered out into the darkness. A single headlight carved through the fog and rain, approaching my property just as it had earlier that day. This time, however, the rider extinguished their light when they were about halfway down my access road, disappearing instantly into the darkness. I strained my eyes, trying to track their movement, but they had vanished completely. Minutes passed without any sign of the rider. Where had they gone? Why return in the middle of such a violent storm, especially at night? The rational explanations I had constructed earlier began to crumble. No lost traveler returns to the same wrong turn twice in one day, certainly not during a night storm in the middle of nowhere. I retrieved my Remington shotgun from the gun cabinet in my bedroom. It was a tool I kept solely for protection against the occasional coyote or mountain lion, never expecting to feel the need for it against a human threat. Yet here I was, moving from window to window, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. After about 20 minutes of this anxious patrol, I glimpsed something through my rear kitchen window, a dark shape moving quickly through the fog, retreating as soon as I spotted it. Chills ran down my spine at the realization that someone was circling my house. Then came the sounds, footsteps in the mud around the perimeter of my home, splashing through puddles, sometimes stopping directly beneath a window before moving on when I approached. It became a macabre game of cat and mouse, with me always one step behind my unseen visitor. The isolation that had once brought me such peace now felt like a trap. The nearest sheriff's deputy was at least 30 minutes away, and cell service was spotty at best during good weather. During a storm like this, it was non-existent. As the footsteps continued their methodical circuit around my house, I made a desperate decision. I went to my garage, climbed into my Ford F-250, and started the engine. With a deep breath, I hit the automatic door opener, quickly reversed out into the yard, and spun the truck around to face the house. Then I flipped on the high beams and the powerful LED light bar mounted on my roof. The sudden flood of light illuminated my entire property, and standing directly outside my living room window was a tall figure dressed in black rain gear. In his right hand, he held a hammer, poised as if preparing to break the glass. For a split second, our eyes met through the window pane, his expression a mixture of surprise and cold calculation. Then he bolted, sprinting around the side of my house. I kept my high beams trained on the property and saw him retrieve a dirt bike that had been laid flat in the tall grass about 50 yards from my home. He kick-started it and tore off into the darkness, the red taillight gradually disappearing into the stormy night. I didn't sleep for the remainder of that night. The next morning, I drove into Valentine and filed a report with the Cherry County Sheriff's Department. They increased patrols in the area over the next few weeks, but the mysterious rider never returned. Later investigation revealed something even more disturbing. About a month before this incident, an elderly couple living in isolation about 30 miles from my property had been brutally attacked during a home invasion. The assailant had arrived on a dirt bike, cut their phone lines, and broken in through a bedroom window. The case remained unsolved. I've since installed a comprehensive security system with cameras, motion-activated lights, and a satellite internet connection for emergencies. The isolation I once cherished now comes with a heightened vigilance, a constant awareness that in the vast emptiness surrounding my home, there might be eyes watching, waiting for the perfect moment to return. Sometimes I still think about that hammer in his hand, and what might have happened if I hadn't decided to confront the situation when I did. In the emptiness of rural America, you might be miles from your nearest neighbor, but that doesn't mean you're alone. If this story sent shivers down your spine, please hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Tales Vault. Your support helps us reach our first 100 subscribers, and I have many more true stories from the isolated corners of America to share. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay safe, especially when you think you're alone.